this? And do we almost believe them? Is it hard to believe that to be true?
I don't believe, I think lying is part of Hamas's currency, and I think lying is something that Hamas does very strategically and very effectively. So I'm very cynical about this claim of theirs that there was a mix-up. I think what they wanted to do was prolong the agony for Israelis. Hamas are expert at psychological manipulation, and they understand the pain that this hostage situation has caused in Israel. So anything that they can do to exacerbate that and therefore compel ordinary Israelis to put pressure on their government to make concessions that perhaps they otherwise wouldn't make, then that's what Hamas is going to do. And I think, we're on the cusp of negotiations on the second phase of this ceasefire. So I think it's very deliberate.
Yeah, and like you said, I think your people, your colleagues over there at the FDD would also agree, because I did see this on social media from Joe Truzman. We talked to him time and time again, saying if it hasn't become already clear, Hamas is using the hostage exchange as psychological weapon against Israel, the temporary halt of the hostage transfer to the Red Cross, the mix-up, quote-unquote, of the body of Bibas, and the act of bringing 2 hostages still in captivity to witness the release of 6 Israeli hostages are all part of a calculated strategy. I do want to get into another claim, and I know you're talking about lying is the currency of Hamas, in terms of the fact that they are claiming that the Israeli bombing was the culprit behind the death of this mother and the 2 children. What are we learning about that?
Well, we're learning that was an absolutely diabolical lie, Andy. I mean, the fact is that all 3 bodies, of course, Shiri Bibas a bit later, because the body that they originally delivered was of an anonymous Palestinian woman from Gaza. But all these 3 bodies underwent forensic examination. And what the examinations of the 2 boys showed, the 2 small boys, was that they had been strangled with the bare hands of their captors, and that after they died, in what must have been an excruciating death, after they died, the bodies were basically desecrated with stones in order to make it difficult, Hamas thought, for the Israelis to determine the cause of death, and therefore make this nonsense claim about an airstrike seem more credible.
Yeah, and of course, all the Israeli forensic authorities confirm that to be true as well, talking about that. And it's hard to believe some of the details that you are describing with 2 young children that were less than 5 years old. Because I remember we were talking about the ceasefire being complicated by some of these stories, some of what was coming from the hostages. Now looking ahead to the next phase of the ceasefire, is a next phase a real possibility? What do negotiations look like?
Well, I think, prior to the scandal over the Bibas releases, I think there was a lot of confidence on all sides that the second phase, that serious negotiations on the second phase would begin. And I think because of what we've seen over the last few days, and because of the way that Hamas has tried to manipulate this situation, it's now very much up in the air whether the second phase, will begin. One of the key points of that second phase would be the complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. I'm not sure how much appetite there's going to be for that right now, given how Hamas is acting. I think as well that Hamas is desperate to claw some kind of victory here. They have had their leadership decimated over nearly 18 months. They are a shadow of what they were militarily. And this is a long-standing tactic in the Middle East. The second phase requires Israel to withdraw completely from Gaza, which is something that Hamas can portray as a victory to the people of Gaza. And if Hamas is left in power after Israeli withdrawal, I think a lot of people in Israel are going to be very concerned that, a repeat of October the 7th is, if not likely, but certainly possible.
Yeah, we've heard that from Netanyahu, the prime minister there in Israel, trying to wipe Hamas out completely, entirely. From his viewpoint, what is he looking at in terms of this? Because there are different facets for him to analyze for this. What are we expecting to hear from him?
I think we're going to hear much of the same rhetoric that we've heard from him over the last few days. You know, he quoted the biblical book of Psalms the other day in terms of divine vengeance on the terrorists that put the Bibas family through this ordeal. And Netanyahu has not really moved from the position of demanding that any post-war reconstruction in Gaza, that a necessary condition for that to happen is that Hamas